There's a weight you carry that no one else sees. People tell you God forgives, and maybe you even believe it for a moment. But then the memory hits, the regret creeps in, and suddenly you're there again. Back in the moment you said it, did it, chose it, and the shame wraps around you like a second skin. You replay it at night. You wonder if you've truly changed, if you even deserve to. You pray, but part of you holds back, not because you doubt God, but because you can't stop doubting yourself. You can accept that God is gracious, but you struggle to apply that grace to your own heart. It feels easier to stay in the guilt than to believe you're clean, because guilt feels familiar, and forgiveness feels unfair, especially when it's for you. You tell yourself you've moved on, but guilt doesn't listen to logic. It lingers in the quiet moments. It shows up in your reflection. It whispers in your mind, you should have known better. And maybe you should have. Maybe you did, but you still did it. And now, even when others have let it go, you can't. Because you're not just ashamed of what happened. You're ashamed of who you became in that moment. And that shame, it doesn't just haunt what you did, it attacks who you are. That's what makes it harder to forgive. Not the action, but what it revealed. You don't want to be that person again, but part of you fears you still are. And so, instead of receiving grace, you keep punishing yourself over and over, hoping maybe that'll make it right, but it never does. You keep waiting to feel worthy before you forgive yourself, as if one day you'll wake up and finally believe you've paid enough, felt enough, suffered enough, hated yourself enough. But forgiveness doesn't work like that. It isn't a reward for endurance. It's a gift, one you don't earn, you just accept. And that's what makes it so hard, because punishment feels productive, shame feels justified, but grace feels like cheating. It feels reckless. And maybe that's why it's so holy, because it goes where it shouldn't. It finds the place you buried, the version of yourself you stopped praying for. And it says, even here, especially here, you are not beyond mercy. Forgiveness isn't ignoring what happened. It's letting go of who guilt says you still are. You think if you let yourself off the hook, you'll repeat it. That if you stop feeling guilty, you'll stop caring. So you stay in the cycle. Guilt, shame, silence. But guilt doesn't protect you. It paralyzes you. It makes you forget who you're becoming, because it keeps you chained to who you were. God doesn't use shame to change hearts. He uses kindness, not denial, not dismissal, but mercy, honest and clear. The kind that says, yes, that was real, but it's not the end. You don't have to carry the weight to prove you're sorry. You're already seen, already known, already invited back. And the cross, it wasn't just for mistakes you'd make in ignorance. It was for the ones you'd make knowing better and still fall. That includes this. Yes, even this. What if God already forgave what you're still punishing yourself for? What if He's not the one keeping the memory alive? You are. Sometimes the hardest part isn't receiving God's grace. It's believing He meant it. All of it. Even for this. You keep asking Him to show you a sign, but maybe He already did. Maybe the cross was enough. Maybe the empty grave is still speaking. It's finished. Not halfway. Not when you finally forgive yourself. Finished. You don't need to bleed emotionally to prove you're sorry. The blood's already been shed. You don't need to carry shame to stay humble. Real humility is receiving what you didn't earn and letting it change you. You're not stuck because God hasn't moved. You're stuck because you haven't let go. And that's what forgiveness invites you to do. Release what's already been paid for. Forgiveness isn't a feeling, it's a decision. And sometimes you have to choose it long before you feel it. You may not feel clean yet. You may not feel free. But freedom starts when you agree with what God already said. You are not your past. Every time you choose to see yourself through His eyes instead of your guilt, healing begins. Not all at once, but moment by moment. When you remind yourself, I'm not who I was. I'm not what I did. I'm who He says I am. That's not denial. That's redemption. The past may still echo, but it doesn't have the final word. Grace does. And grace never whispers shame. It speaks restoration. So yes, you did it. You broke it. But that's not where your story ends. Not with pain, not with regret, but with grace rewriting what guilt tried to erase. You are not your lowest moment. You are not the mistake that plays on repeat. You are not the voice that tells you, you'll never be whole again. That voice is not God's. His voice speaks differently. He says, you're mine, you're new, you're clean. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about rewriting your future. God doesn't pretend it didn't happen. He redeems it. He weaves your failures into a testimony that speaks of His goodness, not your shame. But to live in that truth, you have to let go of your right to self-punish. You have to surrender the guilt you've worn like armor, because healing doesn't come through hiding. It comes through honesty. And freedom begins when you believe that what Jesus did really is enough, even for you, even for this. You were never asked to be perfect. You were invited to be honest. And maybe that's where freedom begins, not in forgetting what happened, but in believing it no longer defines you. God already knew your failure, and He still chose the cross, still said yes to you, still called you worthy of love, not because of your goodness, but because of His. And that love, it doesn't flinch at your scars. It doesn't ask you to pretend. It just asks you to come as you are, with nothing left to prove and nothing left to hide. Because grace isn't a second chance. It's a new beginning. One that starts not with, I forgive myself, but with, I finally believe He did. So what would happen if you stopped fighting grace and just let it love you?